If I think back to what it was like to leave home and go to college, which I find strangely easy to do, the strongest thing that comes back to me is the feeling of freedom. The feeling of knowing that I was facing the world on my own, and that no path was laid down for me. My path was not charted. I was going to find my way in the world. I would choose my path. The feeling was slightly scary, but mostly it was exhilarating. If I think back to that time, the thing I feel most now is a keening desire to fly back to myself and teach myself something. Notice what I'm saying. This is not the 50-something professor talking to the kid. This is that guy, the person you see on the screen, only later. The guy who most wanted to be himself. A human being fully attuned to the world as it was, in all its glory and sadness, speaking to himself. I'm saying that what I needed most back then was to learn something. But I was at a university, learning. I was about to go out into the world under my own direction, stand up at the machine, operate the levers. But there is so much that I had not been told. Any adult listening, look back on your lives and see if this doesn't sound familiar. Finally, you can choose, and you can just race forward to the thing you chose. And you do. You go straight for it. But you aren't going to it. In fact, you're putting distance between yourself and that thing. Like in a dream, you're making running motions, and you should be going forward, but you aren't. You're going back. You swim straight for the buoy, but you're not gaining on it. The illusion of freedom. The appearance that the thing you want is right there and that you can just go to it. But the current. You can see this in relationships. You rush ahead to someone and do something that you think will close all the distance between you. But all you're doing, actually, is creating distance between you. You're not getting closer to them. You're getting closer to yourself. Rushing closer to yourself, away from them, running to your own desires, the desires you can now enjoy by using them. Yeah, all this is uncomfortably familiar to adults, but it wasn't to me when I was 18 or 22. The illusion of freedom, the appearance that the thing you want is right there and that you can go directly to it. Let me try to convey it in one more scenario, this time one that tells us why this happens. What is the cause of this illusion? Imagine that you are piloting an F-16 and suddenly find yourself under attack. You begin evasive maneuvers, but you can't shake the jet on your tail. Finally, you decide to shoot upwards, abruptly toward the stratosphere, something your machine can handle. You pull back hard and up you go. The earth comes crashing into you. You were upside down, but you didn't know it. You may feel certain that you know which way is up, but you can see the importance of really knowing this. Going straight for what you want in a misreported landscape is a recipe for failure. Now, here is a problem. People don't believe they don't know what is actually where. If you tell a person that they don't know where this thing they are rushing to is, this thing of real importance to them that is calling their name, what does that person say to you? They look at you with some sort of pity, that you think so little of their abilities, think so little of the accuracy of their instincts, and they don't listen to you. They follow those instincts. But say you're learning how to use a powerful machine. And because it is powerful, it is dangerous. There is a time when you trust the person who has used that machine, who can operate it. He's very relaxed around this loud machinery, and he hasn't been maimed by it. You listen to him. You don't follow your instincts. You cross out instinct as a source of reliable information. Cross it out altogether and listen to this person who knows how to work this machine. Now, standing in front of such a machine, if I offer you freedom to do as you please, to follow your instincts, do you want it? No, I think you realize instantly that there is freedom and there is freedom. You do want freedom from injury, freedom to get the job done, and to go home with all your fingers. So on the one hand, there is all of that, and on the other there is freedom at the controls. And frankly, facing a big machine, who cares about that? Freedom or autonomy, in the sense of unimpeded self-direction, is not even a freedom you want. In a scenario like this, no one talks about instinct or people thinking so little of them. We know very well that there is something to learn, and we don't want to have to learn it for ourselves. But isn't life like that? Isn't there something we need to be taught about life? I knew people who were generous with the wrong kind of freedom. I was in bad hands. I once had a job with a printer who had an angry phone call one day about the ski tickets he had forgotten to print. So I got a 10-minute introduction to the platen press, and 4 hours later, I was getting surgery. Isn't life the same kind of thing? Shouldn't we be taught how to use it? Is there a manual? Isn't the manual the revealed truth and all that flows from it, the best that has been thought and written about all that is important? Doesn't a good society teach this diligently to its children? Wouldn't those children be glad that they were not left to figure it all out for themselves? Notice another thing, that when we are taught about a thing that can injure us, and we learn, we gain a kind of freedom. Say your grandfather has a combine or a sawmill. He taught you, and you learned. Now you have the freedom to use this machine. You can walk up to it and use it at will, because that is what you want. You want to be free to come in here and fire this thing up and do the job, and then shut the machine down in one piece so it is ready for use again tomorrow. You want the freedom to help, to work, and to walk away, to do things that matter to you. I didn't have this. I wanted to rush to things. I wanted to make good things happen, but I didn't know where I was. I knew something, but I was a prisoner of this quantum of knowledge, which blocked me, stopped me from hitting the very goals I had set. Whatever I knew, I didn't know the landscape. But a person who knows how to move. This is someone who has picked up a power to do what they are attempting. They have the freedom to do the good things they are trying to do such things at will. They have the freedom to live that I did not. So I want to fly back to myself and say, you can't reach the things that are calling you by running straight to them, because that is not where they are. They are there. They are calling you. But just let me tell you what you don't know. I cared about justice. What was it? Could I say anything about this thing I thought so important? I wanted to be an instrument of justice, a piece of a more just world. Which way? Justice. What is happiness? I wanted to be happy. Now I was in a position to start choosing for myself, choosing things that made me happy. Is that the way to happiness? I assumed it was. Was that a sensible assumption? Had I already had experiences that supported that assumption, or experiences that contradicted it? And what about something like friendship? Surely I already knew what friendship was about. Didn't I have friends already? How could I be missing anything? But what do you have to do to be friends? To have a friend? To be a friend? Is this really common knowledge? Is there nothing to think about? Did I have the answer to any of these questions? Where was my sense of direction coming from? What was it based on? Whose map of these things was I using? People have to study the ground, examine the world, before they draw a map. A map represents knowledge about the lay of the land. Was that what my map represented? Knowledge? It would have been good for me to take an hour one day to ask myself these things. But I never did. These questions didn't occur to me. What is evil? What is art? What is sex? What is the status of passionate desires? Where am I going? What does life hold for me? Very important questions, it turns out. Because in reality, the map I was using wasn't a map at all. It didn't contain any actual direction as to how to get to these things marked on it. What I took for a map was a mere list of words, a big ad for the life I had chosen, a checklist of all the good things I had picked. And I was going to reach them all by instinct. The whole course of my life was set by the thoughts I had cobbled together about all these things. But based on what? It wasn't what we discussed in English class. It wasn't what we talked about at the dinner table. The complete absence of discussion about these things did everything to encourage in me the idea that all we have to guide us is instinct. But let me say in retrospect that if you don't know the machine, you can wreck that machine. You can hurt yourself. You can hurt others. You can lose yourself. You can lose others. You can lose your life for years at a time. Wind up at a place from which it is a long way back to where you were when you were standing free to face the world, ready to live. I know this may sound dramatic, but I'm not talking about becoming a drug addict or an atheist or a thief. You can do a lot less than this and wreck the machine. Because life is something. It has a form, a shape unto itself. Like a machine, it has a character, which can be understood. It wants to be understood. It has a correct manner of operation. It is constructed to allow you to be yourself, to be the person who cares about friendship and justice and happiness. Perhaps you don't find this machine image for life a very good one. A machine is impersonal and mechanical, but life is not. It's just a metaphor I've picked to show that life, like a machine, has a character, which you must learn so that you use it as the Maker intended. But you could also think of it as a garden. Life is a garden given to us with a character that you could be mistaken about, with pre-established ways of going well and going badly. You don't dominate these things, a machine, a garden. You learn how to work with them, how to match your movements to their requirements. You can ruin a garden. You can head for life and let everything here begin to die. You can live badly and have no wisdom to pass on to your children. In everything that I've been saying, we once knew very well. The connection between life and learning was perfectly clear to us. Just as clear was the need of the young man and the young woman to be taught about life. Aristotle talked about friendship, Socrates about desire, Aquinas about sex, happiness, Plato about justice, Paul about love, Augustine about evil, Basil about purpose. These are not subjects that children are quite ready to understand at the level needed by an adult. That is, a person moving through the world and making their own decisions about love and justice. But the youth, who is already leaving home, directing his or her own life, is swimming in this very water. To learn about these things was called training in wisdom. It was not against any young person's initiative or freedom to be told that if you sail in that direction, there be monsters. Wisdom is what allowed us to live, to fit into reality, to be happy. It is agreed that we all want to be happy, said Augustine. And what makes people happy is a thing fit to bestow real happiness. So Augustine said, everyone becomes happy in virtue of his pursuit and possession of that supreme good, and there is never the smallest argument that that is what we want. But what is that thing? To live is to seek it. But to search for it as if you must find it on your own, and could do so, is a rather stunning vote of self-sufficiency. How often have we been reminded that this way of thinking was our past and is our inheritance? Were you ever urged to study wisdom, or taught that life isn't just there for the taking? Wasn't the message rather to use school to set up a job, to quick step into prosperity so that you can be happy? What about the mysteries of heaven and earth? All those things that are invisible to the carnal-minded, as Pascal put it? Is wisdom to be no part of our education? What did I know about any of this, as I stood ready to rush into the world, into life, even though everything I was rushing to was the very subject matter of the education that was suited to this phase of my life? And the irony is that I was at a university, studying the humanities, reading Pascal. I still have my text. Yet I was not hearing anything about this. Today, there are a great many people who are critical of what passes for education in our time. Perhaps you are one of them. Teachers who have labored to recover the lost tools of learning that a reckless society has let slip. Parents who have made great sacrifices to homeschool or to seek out classical alternatives to the witless culture that has too often got hold of the formation of their children. Young people who have taken a harder path to get better schooling. Don't give up on what you have started. Many of you draw a sharp contrast between ways of educating that used to be valued versus current ways that are corrosive. Well, beyond high school, what is this world's vision of higher learning, and what did we once believe? And whose view do we tend to share?
Purpose of an educational system is to inquire and create, search the riches of the past, try to internalize the parts of them that are significant to you, question doctrine, question authority, act freely under your own impulses. It's you, the learner, who is going to achieve, and it's really up to you what you'll master, where you'll go, how you'll use it. That's, in my view, what an educational system should be like down to kindergarten. The other concept is essentially indoctrination. People have the idea that from childhood, young people have to be placed into a framework in which they'll follow orders, accept existing frameworks, and not challenge, and so on, and this is often quite explicit.
On the question of how a person learns about life, what is your outlook? It is a dogma of our time that we should leave this to the individual. For a century, people have believed that there is no inheritance, no tradition of wisdom. But is the school of life simply life itself? Does each one of us have to find life alone? Is it really true that on the central issues of life, the truth cannot be settled except as I myself see it? How did we come to think that the nature of human life depends on us? That the deepest meaning of sex, the definition of good and evil, the meaning of art, the trajectory of desires is so profoundly dependent on our own individual uniqueness that there is nothing we could be taught about such things, nothing to learn that we haven't picked up already. If this is what we think, then our thinking is indeed conformed to this world and not to our past. In that tradition, there was instruction to offer about all of these things. All of the things I have spoken of: sex, evil, friendship, desire, justice, love, the very purpose of our lives, were the appropriate topics of higher education. The very topics a person entering adulthood was most keen to know about, to acquire real knowledge about. But as soon as we mention real knowledge, the issue of pseudo-knowledge is upon us. And haven't we been warned about this? Where is this abundance? Is it there on every university campus, wherever Plato and Augustine are taught? It is not hard to find courses on the classical and Christian traditions. But think about the problem this raises. First, you have a body of work conceived to map out reality, to show us the conditions in which we have to live, which is what Plato and Augustine, Dante and Pascal were doing. And then today, you have a group of people elected to teach this body of work, but who don't believe in the problem this work was made in response to. Today's teachers believe that there is no useful map of reality that we could draw up for each other. What then do such people make of those works? If the purpose that certain historical artifacts once served has become obsolete, you talk about their obsolescence and the quaint or maybe horrifying purposes these objects once served. You don't train people in how to use them. You talk about these things in some other way. At the average university, the task of the humanities is certainly not to make these implements functional, to take up these dubious old museum pieces and make them work again. The current task of the humanities is to make them intelligible, much as a museum guide makes intelligible the ghastly objects in the vitrine, the material remains of dead traditions. Today you will be hard-pressed to find a college where our tradition survives. Colleges and universities don't come to you today with the intention to serve your life. That would be paternalistic. You are your own master. And what, in any case, would they help you with? University profs don't see young people as needing to be freed from a world of illusion. They see them as people at the mall, with money to spend on something they want. It is true that the BA may be useful. It may be treated as a vital job credential. But will courses in looking at bioethics through the lens of films, or the dinner party in ancient Rome, or women in science fiction have any practical bearing on the job that diploma will help you get? No. These are course offerings, merchandise, intellectual entertainments laid out for you in a consumer world. Even Nietzsche, over a century ago, could see this. The modern public school, as a so-called educational institution, he said, has no serious desire to cultivate the pupil, to shape the student into a noble human being. The high school and the university just knead and mold him into the right shape to take his place in the rank and file, purging him of everything that might make him strive after higher aims. The entire system of higher education, said Nietzsche, has lost what matters most, the end, as well as the means to that end. That cultivation, shaping the young person into a decent adult, is itself an end, and not the Reich. In the 21st century, let us substitute the economy or a good job. This has been forgotten. No one, he said, is any longer free to give his children a noble education. Anyone who does not see the difference between the real thing and the ersatz copy might well be beguiled by their superficial resemblance. You might just learn to replace substance with nothing. The novelist Saul Bellow once said, "In our world, it seems that as soon as a clear need appears, it is met falsely. It becomes a new occasion for exploitation. We're not sold real apples. We're sold the idea of an apple. Not real bread, no, wonderful bread, stripped of savor and nutrients. If you want the liberal arts, you'll get them, with all their sustenance removed." Bellow said, "I often think there's more hope for the young worker who picks up a copy of Faulkner or Melville or Tolstoy from the rack in the drugstore than there is for the B.A. who has had the same writers interpreted for him by his teachers and can tell you what Ahab's harpoon symbolizes or what Christian symbols there are in light in August." In colleges and universities, he said, what people learn is how to conduct a cultured conversation without betraying ignorance. But that is not what these works were made for. They were made to help you live. And in that project, you are not alone, so there is no need to retreat to your bedroom with your personal copy of Plato. Life is not the project of any lone individual, at least not in the tradition we are heir to. More than a century after Nietzsche diagnosed the decrease and even the destruction of learning, watched higher learning becoming every day more accidental and more uncertain, should we trust that our tradition, at least, remains unscathed? If you have heard all of this before, if our tradition has made all of this clear to you, then perhaps. But if you have scarcely heard any of it, it may be that you are hearing it today because it is only now that we are awakening to all that we have lost. Awakening thanks to alternative institutions that have separated themselves enough to see what has happened to us. Perhaps it is time, now that so many have done so much to encourage real education in grade school, middle school, and high school, to ask what higher education really is in the tradition and culture that you identify with. As a parent, an educator, or a student continuing down this road, how do you see higher learning? And who will you allow to teach you? If all that you or your students or your children bring back from a year at college is a credential or interesting information, having been lured to shop through the course calendar and play with ideas since there's nothing anyone needs from them, if that is all that we buy with our education dollar, then to quote an old Renaissance classicist, we have just become slaves of the world when we could be free.